If I asked you what the most dominant pitch in baseball today is, you might say Mason Miller's 104 mph fastball. You might say Yohan Duran's 100 mph splitter. You could also argue that it's Tarik Skubal's signature changeup. None of those are the answer I'm looking for though. In fact, it has nothing to do with a name on the back of the jersey. It's actually an answer that's a lot simpler than that. It's just strike one. Getting ahead in the count and making it 0-1 is one of the biggest advantages a pitcher can give himself. Pitchers who do it have a higher strikeout rate, lower walk rate, and lower ERA. It basically sends every statistic that you want in the right direction. But unfortunately, as strong as it is, it's not as easy as it sounds, and it's one of the biggest reasons why good pitchers are good and bad pitchers are, well, bad. As it turns out, winning the first pitch is a big part of winning the game. So sit back and relax as we dive into some of the single most important pitches in every game, the first pitches. Look at this graph that shows all pitchers from the 2025 season that threw at least 150 innings. On the x-axis is their first pitch strike percentage, which in this case is the percentage of plate appearances that started 0-1, so balls in play on 0-0 don't count. On the vertical axis is ERA. When we look at the average pitcher's ERA given their first pitch strike percentage, we see a significant association. The average ERA of the pitcher goes down by 7 points on average for every percentage point of first pitch strike rate. If we do the same thing for strikeout rate, we see another significant relationship. As the first pitch strike rate goes up, strikeout rate also goes up. With walk rate, it's the opposite. As it goes up, walk rate goes down. What about for some more advanced stats that some of you might like? FIP, for example, fielding independent pitching. Well, it's the same story. Pitchers who get to 0-1 more often, on average, have lower FIPs. There's also a significant association with xFIP. Pitchers who have higher first pitch strike rates, on average, are more valuable according to WAR. How does a single pitch of every at-bat have such a significant association with overall pitcher success? Well, the more you think about it, the less crazy it seems. Ultimately, the end goal for all teams is to win the game at the end of the day, pretty obvious. The pitcher's contribution to a W is to prevent runs. Some of the run prevention is on the defense, so to focus on what the pitcher can control, their job is to strike guys out, not walk hitters, pitch deep into games, get ground balls, etc. And what is a factor that goes into these things? First pitch strike percentage. That effect works its way up the chain, all the way to the outcome of the game. For instance, higher first pitch strike rate is associated with higher strikeout rates. Higher strikeout rates are associated with less runs allowed. Less runs allowed are, of course, going to lead to more wins for the team. So if you track it up through this chain, teams that get to more 0-1 counts on the mound are typically winning more games. If you still don't believe in the first pitch strike, then don't worry. There's even more compelling information coming your way. Let's break it down into the smallest window and look into how the first pitch affects the result of a single at-bat. The first pitch of an at-bat could be the difference between facing Phillies star shortstop Trea Turner or Luis Rengifo. Nothing personal against Rengifo, but out of the 145 qualified hitters, Turner was the 37th best by OPS with 812, and Rengifo was 143rd with 622. Obviously, most pitchers would rather face Rengifo than Turner, and there isn't really much of an argument for the other side. Just like most of you watching this are not subscribed, so if you would, that would be great. I just want you to keep this comparison in mind as we go through some numbers here. If we separate the plate appearances that started 0-1 versus 1-0, there's a stark difference in hitter performance. In the plate appearances that start 0-1 during the 2025 season, hitters end up having a batting average of .218, an on-base percentage of .265, and a slugging percentage of .352. That gives these outcomes an OPS of .617. If we fill out the same values for the 1-0 plate appearances, hitters hit to the tune of .258, have an on-base percentage of .367, and a slugging percentage of .445. This gives these outcomes an OPS of .812. Now, if you remember from not too long ago, one of these numbers is a Luis Rengifo level hitter, and the other is Trea Turner. So if you're a pitcher facing a lineup of average hitters, the first pitch of each at-bat can be the difference of facing a lineup full of Trea Turners or a lineup full of well below average hitters. Clearly, strike one is important. Every plate appearance has a path that it follows, and we can track those possible paths using this diagram. There are two zones that I want to highlight here, when hitters are behind in the count versus when hitters are ahead in the count. Good pitchers live in this green zone. Plate appearances that end in these counts have an OPS of just .530. Plate appearances that end in the red zone have an OPS of 951. That's quite the difference, and you might be able to see why you'd want to be in the green zone as a pitcher. But why is hitting so much harder in these counts? Well, the pitcher has a lot more flexibility. When ahead in the count, pitchers throw 46% fastballs, around 18% off-speed pitches, and 36% breaking balls. This is a pretty even spread, which means the hitter needs to be able to cover all different speeds and movements. The hitter has a lot less margin for error. The pitcher doesn't need to throw a strike, he can work any part of the plate that he wants. The hitter, however, needs to protect the plate and not watch strike 3, meaning he's forced to swing at borderline pitches and is more likely to chase outside the zone. If the hitter is ahead in the count, then the tables completely turn. The pitch mix for a pitcher often simplifies, and they throw fastballs now 64% of the time when they're behind in the count. This takes away a lot of the guessing and reacting that the hitter has to do in a few hundred milliseconds, ultimately making the whole process a lot easier for them. Now let's go back to this diagram. There are only 3 counts where the pitcher is ahead: 0-1, 0-2, and 1-2. And if the pitcher falls behind 1-0 in the count, they've already backed themselves into the red zone. The only way they can climb their way back to the green zone is to throw back-to-back strikes. Even then, they can only access one of these counts, 1-2. 0-1 and 0-2 are essentially locked away forever until the plate appearance ends. So if something as simple as this can give a pitcher this strong of an advantage, then why don't all pitchers just do it? Well, like I mentioned before, it's a lot harder than it sounds, and the further you look into it, the more secrets we find to what makes good pitchers good and bad pitchers bad. Here are the top 10 pitchers in terms of first pitch strike percentage, which in this case is the number of 0-1 counts a pitcher was in over the total number of batters that they faced. A lot of these names you might recognize as some of the best pitchers in the league currently, and no surprise, Tarik Skubal's on top. When we look at the bottom 10, you can see some of the lesser pitchers of the 2025 season, although certainly not all of these pitchers struggled in 2025. Max Fried and Hunter Brown were great. That's because these guys are good at one particular thing, which we'll get into later. There's a nice simple sanity check that I like to do when looking at pitching stats for 2025. If Tarik Skubal's on top, then it's a pretty good indicator that the stat is at least doing something right. You might be wondering just how Tarik Skubal is as dominant as he is. A huge reason for that is that he gets ahead of hitters more often than any other pitcher in the league. But how does he do that? There are 2 things that Skubal does really well: force hitters to swing and force hitters to miss. Skubal has the highest swing rate in the league at 54.5%, meaning that hitters swing 54.5% of the pitches that he throws. When hitters swing at the pitch, then there's a 0% chance that it results in a ball. Just forcing the hitters to swing a lot is not anything special on its own, but those swings against Skubal often come up empty. His zone contact rate, which is the percentage of pitches that hitters make contact with when they swing at a pitch in the zone, is 78%. I'll give you a few seconds to guess where that ranks in the league. Yeah, also first place. There's a stat that basically sums all of this information up into one nice and neat number, and that is called strike plus whiff rate. This stat adds the rate at which pitchers get called strikes and swinging strikes together. Ultimately, this is the rate at which a pitcher advances the count in their favor. Doing this on the first pitch of the at-bat is super important in deciding what direction the at-bat will go. In case you got the last one wrong, I'll give you a few seconds to guess who leads in this stat. It's Tarik Skubal. Basically, this is saying that Skubal has the command to pitch in and around the zone and force hitters to swing, and even when he does throw pitches in typically hittable locations, hitters struggle to even make contact. When we look at the other end of the list, we have some pitchers that have either A, a hard time commanding a pitch in the zone and ultimately throw a lot of balls, or B, they entice the batter to swing, but they don't quite have the pitch arsenal to force a swing and miss. These are things that Antonio Senzatella, Sean Burke, Tomoyuki Sagano, Eduardo Rodriguez, and the other pitchers listed here struggled with this year. They either didn't have great command on the first pitch, or they were aggressive, but hitters jumped on the first pitch. The one thing we still have unanswered is these outlier names in these lists. Miles Mikolas was not great this year, but he finds himself in the top 10 of first pitch strike percentage, while Fried and Brown do not belong with the names in the bottom 10. This can be explained by quality of contact. When you compare the barrel rates that the batters had against these pitchers this year, you can see an obvious pattern. Fried and Brown have much lower numbers, while Mikolas actually had the highest in the league. Barrel rate is the proportion of batted balls that are hit hard and have an optimal launch angle, aka batted balls that go for extra base hits usually. If we look at this diagram again, but this time only for Michaelis, we can see that the pattern makes sense. Hitters do worse against Michaelis in 0-1, 0-2, and 1-2 counts, though his baseline outcome is pretty poor, at least in the point of view for the Cardinals. His OPS when the count is even is around 700. That number gets better when he's ahead and way worse when he's behind. His baseline stuff is unfortunately so ineffective that the advantage he gets by getting ahead in the count isn't reflected in his overall numbers compared to other pitchers. Max Fried, on the other hand, forces hitters into a very low baseline performance because he's very good at inducing ground balls and weak contact. The pattern is still the same though, the numbers are better when Fried gets ahead. But his fly ball and hard contact suppression is so good that his balls in play are going to be less dangerous in general even when he's behind in the count. Throwing a first pitch strike is still important for Max Fried, just not as important for other pitchers. This, however, is just one side of the coin. We focused mainly on the pitching side of things during the first pitch, but what should the hitter be doing? When we look into that, it disproves one of baseball's longest lasting strategies. Here's a graph showing the rate at which hitters swing at the first pitch since 2008. As you can see, as time has gone on, players are swinging at more and more first pitches. A long-time baseball strategy was to go up to the plate and take the first pitch. You could get to know the pitcher's release, see how the pitch behaves, and get a little comfortable. But getting comfortable is not worth watching a pitch go right down the middle. Not only do you miss an opportunity to hit a good pitch, but now you also just put yourself behind in the count 0-1. Which I hope by now, you all know how bad that is for the hitter. This is something that Luis Arias has been known to do in his career, intentionally watching the first pitch go by, sometimes a fastball right down the middle. Given that the first pitch is in the zone, Arias watches it called for a strike roughly 74% of the time. This is the 10th highest rate in the league. Chase Meidroth of the Chicago White Sox leads the way at 84.5%. Taking a first pitch strike on its own is not terrible, especially if it's a well-placed pitch, but going up to the plate with the mindset that you're going to take a pitch no matter what is not only forfeiting possibly the best pitch to hit, but also putting you at risk of losing the battle of the first pitch and going down 0-1. It's a move that can come up in a few certain situations, but as an overall strategy, it's just not effective. I think Matt Vasgersian says it best.
First pitch swinging. Oh, and first pitch crushing!
The league's hitters obviously agree with this conclusion, as this trend suggests that they are swinging at the first pitch more than ever recorded. Whether they're doing it intentionally or it's just natural evolution of the league getting more optimal over time, hitters are giving themselves a better chance of winning the first pitch. When you break it all down, baseball often comes down to the smallest battles: one pitch, one decision, and even one count. The first pitch might seem insignificant on its own, just another number in a 100-pitch outing, but when you zoom out, it's shaping everything that happens after. The difference between 0-1 and 1-0 changes a hitter's odds, a pitcher's plan, and ultimately the outcome of games. The best pitchers in the league, guys like Tarik Skubal, understand that the dominance is about controlling the count from the very first pitch, because winning that moment, the very first pitch of the at-bat, might just be the best pitch in baseball. Thank you for watching, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.